Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode here at The Authentic with Jared and myself, Tanner. And we have Kimmy. Shout out Kimmy over there in the corner.
What up?
What up? All right, well, today we're just going to have a quick episode. Want to come on, give you a quick market update of what we're seeing here in the Kansas City market, what's going on with rates, with inventory. Just give you a quick update of everything. So, Jared, I'll let you kick it off. Anything that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I think specifically, we're having a lot of conversations about this amongst a lot of, members of the real estate community and lending community. I think the big thing I want to talk about, we'll obviously get into rates and stats and stuff. I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I'm going to throw you a curveball, but I feel like the fatigue of buyers in general, I think the general public, I think the fatigue is starting to show.
Yep.
And I don't just mean of people not filling out mortgage applications. But one of the big things I want to talk about today, and I do want to get into this later, curious about your experience though, I think they're tired of what we're telling them on social media, right? I think that we're all being cheerleaders when we should be probably being teachers and educators.
Right.
And it seems to me that people are, and I'm just casually on looking at what I see, engagement and things going on social media. I think people are tired of what we're telling them.
By now, right? And
yeah.
They are. I had a first-hand experience of that, had a post go viral, lots, 150, 200,000 views, and was getting blasted because I was essentially one of the people saying, hey, you should buy now. And I still believe you should. But at the same time, I think people are.
Yeah.
There is fatigue of hearing the same thing, and people are worried about their own jobs, the economy, what's going to happen, where that's a very real conversation that goes on behind closed doors with people. So are you seeing that firsthand with any buyers, or what are you seeing with it?
Well, I just think in general, it just feels different. The air in our industry feels different, and as it should. But I do think too, like you and I always talk about holding ourselves and other realtors and people in our profession accountable for what we're doing, and we're going to get into a lot of that later too. But I just think that the biggest thing is we have to educate people, and we're going to go through the stats and what we're seeing. It doesn't apply to everybody. I personally still think it's a good time to buy a house just because of what I think is coming.
Right.
But people have to be smart. And we're going to talk about what our recommendations are for people down the road. But also too, it's important for us to tell people, if you want to buy a home, we can help get creative in doing that. It doesn't have to look the same. Yep. Like if you want to get into a new home, we can help. Right. We can do things to kind of walk you through that. If you don't, if it's not the right time, don't get bullied into it.
Right, yeah. And no one should get bullied into it. Is essentially, I always say every time I buy a house, is my job to show you where your money's going, right? And if your money doesn't feel comfortable, then it's not the right time. Mm-hmm. No one's going to hold you accountable. No one's saying anything. There are some realtors out there right now. We made a comment earlier that if you threw a stone, you'd probably hit a realtor in Kansas City, right? Well, there are realtors out there that get what I call commission breath, where they haven't had a deal 3, 4, 5 months, and it kind of stinks, where they're preaching out the same things all the time. So you just need to be smart who you're working with, what you're working with, and make sure the situation's right for you. Because at the end of the day, me and Jared, we don't have to pay your mortgage payment for you. And that's the first conversation we have with any first-time home buyers is, what is your monthly payment? What can you afford? Does this make sense for you? And if the answer is no, then that's okay. I'm not saying it's going to get any better anytime soon, but that's okay. We can figure that out.
Yeah. And so basically my whole thing, and I want to start with that too, just like the people that are listening, we see you, we hear you, we understand, and our goal today especially is just to break down some information for people, and that's what I want this to be, and I want to make sure we're true to that, which I think we have been, but also too, I don't want people just to be like, oh, we're just going to hear the same old stats again, but I think it's...
They're realtors, and they want us to buy homes.
Right.
Yep, totally get that, and we, at the end of the day, like I said, it's your money that we're trying to make work for you. And I think, like you said, real estate was the sexy thing to do for a lot of our lives for the last 10 years or so, because real estate investing was starting to be new. Airbnb was new 10 years ago. Now look at that. And people are starting to get worn out of it's hard to make a deal, and it's not sexy unless you have to move. You're not just going to move or buy 10 houses because rates are so cheap and it makes sense to cash flow rentals, right? So you just have to be smart.
Right.
Just have to be smart.
Yeah. And one of the things too, I don't remember if I said it on this podcast before or not, but I think it's a Warren Buffett quote. I don't know. Right. Somebody much smarter and richer than we'll ever be. but it's essentially when people get greedy, get scared. When people get scared, get greedy.
Yep.
And what we saw is greedy is probably more of a blanket term of when we saw the influx of people into the market and accidental landlords and the stuff that we've already talked about.
Yep.
Now everybody's getting scared, and I think overall there's going to be a huge opportunity for buyers.
Did you see what Warren Buffett just did?
No.
He took $862 million out of the stock market and put it into home builders.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
$862 million. The same week that the guy who with the film movie The Big Short, you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Who shorted the housing market in 2008? He just bought over $1 billion worth of puts on the stock market, and so they're taking their money against the stock market and putting it into housing.
Okay.
So if you're following money, which is what people say to do, Warren Buffett's the #1 value investor of all time, and he just took money out of the stock market and put it into home builders.
Right.
Why? He understands supply and demand. So if you're seeing that,
right,
it may make sense.
Right. And opportunity, I want to be clear too. By opportunity, I don't necessarily mean a lower price. I don't necessarily mean a good price. What I mean by opportunity is you have an opportunity to reduce your cash to close, or to buy down a rate, which we've talked a lot about, or to get in a home with less competition.
Right.
Again, the opportunity is there, but don't confuse opportunity with
Lower
getting
price.
a deal.
Yep.
Because I'll show you the stats. A deal is still not going to happen. But I think obviously the most pressing thing, the most new thing that happened today is the rate conversation. So
right.
do you have information on that?
Yeah. So a couple things on rates. When we're filming this, it's the middle of September of 2023. Rates are in the mid 7s. They are been there for a while now. Been at over 7% at the highest it's been for 3-4 months. I mean, the past year has been for a month straight now. And so, when's that going to happen? Come down? No one has that crystal ball, right? Economists have been missing out on when they thought the timelines of, and we'll hit on that in a second.
Everybody has, for the record.
Everybody has on the timeline. Everyone thought going into quarter 3 to quarter 4 is when rates would start to come down. That's been pressed back to quarter 2 to quarter 3 of next year. Nobody knows when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Inflation numbers just came out today, and inflation went up a little bit. However, it didn't make a huge anything happen on the mortgage market because it wasn't that big of difference in the real inflation numbers versus the forecast. It's a 0.1 difference, it's 3.7% compared to 3.6 forecasted. But at the same time, shelter, which is housing, came down in inflation. And so is that for the first time, shelter actually got a little bit better or worse with inflation for the first time in a long time. So that helped the mortgage industry. Rates are still in the 7s. They're probably going to be there for the rest of the year, at least the rest of the year. And so with that, mortgage applications were down 27% year over year today, and they're the lowest they've been since 1996. That doesn't scream worrisome or, oh my gosh, we need to worry about, is the housing market crashing? No, people are just in the poison pill. If they had a 2% interest rate, they don't want to sell to get to a 7. Can't fault anyone for that. There's some strategies around that to get back to, if you want to rent out your house and buy a new one, some strategies to make it work to lower your monthly payment. But there is an opportunity, just like you've kind of hit on now, where the market has shifted. We felt it here strongly in Kansas City. I have seen it with a bunch of my buyers, where now it's almost back to I would say fully a buyer's market. There's pockets of everything, but you can get some deals out there if you're looking for them.
Yeah.
You can get, like I said, not really purchase price reductions, but you can get a little bit of help, at least not having 6, 7, 8 offers right now.
Right.
So
I always think too, and we'll touch on this because we've done it before, and we're just going to touch on it really quickly because this is probably what you got crushed for.
Right.
But essentially and we've talked about it, there is going to be an influx of the 70 to 80% of new buyers into the pool if it goes down.
Right.
So you can either buy a house for $500 at 7% now,
right,
or you can buy that same house for $600,000 at a 6% interest rate. That is my prediction of what's going to be happening in the next 12 to 24 months.
Every single person in housing's prediction.
Right.
And it's a simple supply and demand. And on a very small micro scale of me and Jared sitting here looking at our little pool of buyers or people that have applied with mortgages with us, we're seeing a lot of people sit on the sidelines saying they're waiting. Mm-hmm. And so if we're seeing that individually, and we just talked to 20 other realtors right before this, and every one of them are saying they're having those same conversations, that's very small compared to what we're really going to see. and every single economist is saying the exact same thing.
Right.
And so there is that small opportunity for the next, personally, I think it's the next 3 to 6 months of waiting for the market to shift, and people that are kind of scared of where we're at right now, that you can get in a house and maybe get a buy down on interest rate, or get your monthly payment where you want it to be, or turn around and all of a sudden, like I said, you're getting a purchase price at $500,000 where you're going to go back to that crazy seller's market as soon as rates drop. And it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when that's going to happen.
For people that don't know, will you talk about when we say a buy down?
Yeah.
Will you talk about that?
Yeah, 100%. So what a rate buy down is essentially when, let's say we'll just stay on that $500,000 purchase price. Let's say you find a house for $500,000 and the rates today are at 7.25. What a buy down is, there's two different types, a permanent buy down and a temporary buy down. What a buy down is essentially you are buying down your interest rate to a lower interest rate. And so let's say today's rate's at 7.25%, $500,000 purchase, but there's no offers on this house. And so you ask the sellers to cover $5,000 in seller paid closing costs, meaning the seller's going to give you $5,000 that you can pay for closing costs, or you can use it to buy down your interest rate. And so you use that $5,000, buy down your rate to 6.75. All of a sudden you have 6.75 rate, which costs you, it saves you about $200 a month, and you're in a house that is a $500,000 home compared to $600,000. So what a buy down is you're using proceeds or seller paid closing costs, credit from the seller, to buy down your interest rate. A buyer can buy it down themselves. Don't know if it necessarily makes sense, because if rates do shift and they start going down, not sure you want to pay $5,000 out of pocket, but there is those deals out there right now where you can get a seller to pay down that interest rate. So buy down is essentially buying down your interest rate from where it is to a smaller interest rate to save you money monthly. And there are deals out there if you're looking.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to say, if you have clients that are doing that, the lending side of that's very important, because I don't know that a lot of listing agents understand that. So
right.
You make sure that call somebody like Tanner, who's going to be able to walk another agent through that.
100%.
Because it could be confusing for somebody, and if you have a good lender to talk that through.
100%, and it's very, very important right now, because if you're a listing agent and you see that this buyer wants $10,000 in seller paid closing costs, you're like, oh my gosh, they have no cash, what's going on? No, I'm going to call on the back end for the buyer and explain that, hey, they're using this $10,000 to do what's called a 2-1 buy down, which means you're temporarily buying down your interest rate for the first 2 years. And the reason they're doing this is they're asking you to pay for your interest. It's the same bottom line for your sellers. There's no difference for them, but it's going to get them under contract at a price that they can afford, and that's what they want to do. And
right.
So this isn't anything about their finances. I can guarantee you this is going to close. This is just helping the buyers and your sellers are walking away with the same amount. That's the call that we make. And after you explain it to the sellers what they're using those proceeds for, that the sellers are giving, 99% of the time the agent's like, okay, thank you, it makes sense.
Yeah, so that's important too. On our end, obviously I want to talk about some stats, and this is going to, what I said earlier is going to make sense after we kind of talk through what I want to talk through as well with stats. But when we look year to date, so obviously it's September now, we have stats through August. Those have come out already, so that's what we're going to be talking about specifically here, August 2023. I'm going to throw some numbers at you and just get your reaction.
Beautiful.
Closed sales are down 20%.
Year over year?
This is in Johnson County.
Okay.
Johnson County, larger population of people, but that's what we're going to talk about for this. Down 20%. Inventory is down 8.6%.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Supply.
And we say, okay, yeah, keep going, supply.
Yeah. Supply is up 13%.
Really?
Yeah.
Explain that one to me.
Okay, so inventory and supply is obviously a little bit different.
Yep.
Supply is a number that talks about if every house sold and no more came on the market, how long would it take
Gotcha.
for all those homes to sell, right? We always talk about a balanced market being about 6, right? So when you look at supply at like a level of 6% or 6 is kind of the number. We don't really talk about percentages much, but a balanced market is the number of 6.
Okay.
So we had it last year was below 1% or below 1. So now we went from 1.5 to 1.7.
Okay.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 13% because those numbers are typically fairly small.
Gotcha.
Okay. Inventory is what's currently on the market. How many homes are currently on the market? So that's why those numbers.
And inventory is down.
Yeah.
From last year.
Yep.
Okay.
So 1,300. I'm talking averages here. 1,300 in 2022 to 1,200 in 2023.
Okay.
That's for August. So you look at those numbers and you think, okay, that's starting to sound kind of like a buyer's market. I mean,
right.
Inventory is lower,
right.
Of course, but when supply is up,
correct,
that there's more to choose from,
right?
Right, and so that sounds like it's starting to shift. But the thing is that our average sales price is still going up, and it's up 5%. Okay, and that is the year over year, from 2022 to 2023 through August. So,
wow.
When you think of that, and that's where we're talking about, you're not going to get a deal.
Right.
But because of the inventory of the supply of what we're talking about, there is that opportunity because houses are not flying off the market. Some are, obviously.
Right.
You know, and so I'm going to show a house today that's been on the market, and we're looking at being $50,000 under what their original listing price was.
That's huge.
And this is my clients. I'm having this conversation with them. This is your opportunity.
Right.
This is your opportunity to get this house into your budget.
Right.
Right. It needs some work. We know it needs some work. That's why it hasn't sold. But if you want this neighborhood and this size of house in your budget,
this is your chance.
This is your chance.
This is your chance. First time, your only chance you're going to have in a long time. This is the next 3-6 months probably.
And I've not had that conversation.
Yeah, I was saying, when was the last time?
I've been in this since 2015, and it's been a long time. There was a short window when I remember telling people, like, there's going to be a short window where this is going to be a good opportunity to buy.
We had a very short window. It wasn't even this drastic of a change. Last year, when rates hit 7 around November, for the first time, that you had like November, December of last year, you had a very, very, very short opportunity to get in. And what did rates do? They were at 7% in November. They shifted down to around mid to low 6s for a little bit, and it hit spring market. And then what happened? Right back. Inventory you were having 5, 6, 7 offers on every single house. Everything was crazy, all the way until rates started to go up. Now we're back to where we were last year at this time, in the 7s once again, and you do have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, that supply number is very interesting to me. I've never heard that, and that's actually huge. It makes sense. I've had more people that were able to actually talk to the sellers and get inspections. Like, inspections are normal again.
Yeah.
On every house, which is huge. You should have inspections, but they're back. So next 3 to 6 months is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and two, I think people need to understand that we need to get creative as well, and agents need to be creative. And here's a stat that shows why the opportunity is here. In the past 7 days, okay, so today's the what? 13th. So from today to 7 days ago, last week at this time, how many new listings do you think came on? Now this is all of MLS.
Oh, and shoot, no clue. 300.
641 new listings.
Okay.
Now,
what's the average in a week?
Oh gosh.
You don't need those exact numbers.
I don't know. I mean, usually on Thursdays and Fridays you can expect 200 to 300 new listings towards the end of the week, and then it's.
So the past week you had 641.
Yeah.
New listings. Okay.
Now today's Wednesday. We've only been through one weekend, so 641. But here's the thing: of the homes that have had price decreases or have come back on the market because of inspections, that number is 693 in the past 7 days. So don't just look at new listings.
Wow.
You have a better opportunity to find a price decrease. Now, and because sellers are still listing their house for numbers they think are enormous.
Right.
And they're just not getting them anymore. And that is the opportunity right there. Or back on market. I'm not scared of a back on market house.
Right.
Inspections, that house had been inspected most likely, and now we have knowledge.
Right.
The opportunity is insane right now.
Wow.
And so that number, take all these stupid stats aside, that number alone tells me enough to know that if you're on the fence and if you are in a financial position to do it, you've got a great opportunity now that that in 6 months we're going to be on this podcast being like,
told you so.
Remember September?
We actually had opportunities to get seller paid closing costs and buy down your interest rate. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
That is the most interesting stat I've heard,
Mm-hmm.
right there. And that is where you need an experienced agent on your side, I will say, because you need someone that's looking at those markets that are coming back on, because they know that, oh, that could be a deal waiting to happen.
Right.
This is the best interest of my buyer. Oh, this is back on. Why? They call the listing agent and find out why. Oh, it was a bad one little thing with the roof, or this buyer just saw the interest rates and got scared.
Yeah.
It could happen. And so it's very important, one, to talk with your lender, know what your budget is, but then two, to back it up with having a knowledgeable agent that has that knowledge of, hey, look, these are the stats of, there's 690 some houses that are back on market. That is for you. This is our opportunity. Go look at those. We can get in.
Yeah.
Huge.
And it's very important to at least have that discussion, to be open to that, because again, you can save money on inspections. Maybe you don't need to inspect it again. Maybe you're happy with what you've seen,
right.
Or you can make your offer based on what you know needs to be repaired.
Mm.
A ton of opportunity. But moving on from that, predictions. I do want to hear your predictions going into next year, and I think what
should we do?
What I don't.
Coach?
Well, yes, that'll come later, but essentially, everybody's been wrong. We've even talked about it on this podcast.
I've been wrong.
We think rates are going down.
Yeah.
We think rates are going down, and they haven't. Everybody's wrong. Nobody knows
Right.
what the hell's going on.
Right.
But I do want to have a conversation about predictions, because I'm interested to know kind of like what you're looking at and why you're going to say what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, great questions. And to be fair, you're exactly right. Everyone has been wrong on the time. Everyone sees what's going to happen. That's anywhere with housing, economy. Every economist is predicting that rates have to go down in 2024. There's a lot of things back in. One, it's an election year. Historically, during election years, rates almost always go down. Two.
Can I stop you real quick?
Yep.
Because I actually have those stats.
Yeah.
For the last 4 years, last 4 election cycles, it's been in 2008, interest rates went down 5%.
Okay.
The interest rate was not 5%. It went down 5% from the year over year. 2012, it went down 19%. 2016, it went down 5%. 2020, down 23%.
Yeah.
So that's a big factor of looking
It's
at the past of what could happen.
I'm really glad you pulled those.
Yeah.
That is huge, because that is what we've been preaching for everyone, is that every election year, they don't want to go in looking bad. Whoever the presidential candidate is, it doesn't matter what your political stance is, they do not want to go in looking bad, and they want to make the economy seem like we're on the uptick.
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do? They're going to somehow make it where right around that election time, rates will come down. That's now what every economist is predicting. So what my predictions are, listening to multiple economists around the country, is quarter 2 to quarter 3 is when rates will be starting to tick down. And that will be because inflation numbers are based on year-over-year matrix. And year-over-year inflation, if you think about April, May, June of last year, that's when inflation was at the very highest. And so those year-over-year numbers are going to start to show differently. And going into the election year, interest rates should be coming down. There's a lot of other scholastic and different measures that show why. A difference, another one is the difference between the 10-year Treasury and the MBS market, the mortgage-backed security market. It's the widest margin it's ever been in the history of mortgage rates. And so that will have to come back to its historic average difference, and that's about a 2% difference in interest rates and mortgage rates. And so that will take it from 7s into the 5s. So everything is lining up for this to happen. The question is when. All the economists at first predicted it to be starting right now where we're sitting, and it's not. Mm-hmm. And we're going to sit there and say, hey, we messed up. We told you guys they messed up. That's what we were told, right? And people a lot smarter than me are all predicting now quarter 2 to quarter 3. And so I believe that as well, and I believe it more now than I did before because of the election cycle. And so we're kind of bracing for that on the mortgage side. We're trying to get people, like I said, if you can afford a house, you have to, the number one question you ask right now is if you can afford the monthly payment. And if you can, great, we're going to find you a deal. If you can't, that's okay. Just know this is what's probably going to happen once these rates start to come down. So we're predicting to come down. Demand will skyrocket once rates come down. And so there's this small window for the next 6 months. And that's my personal prediction. Obviously, anything can happen, but I think we have 6 months before of rates staying hovering around 7%, and then after that, start going down pretty dang quickly, actually. So, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, most of mine is solely on human emotion and human cycles. And I've said it on. I did a video the other day, and I wish more people would. I just don't think people care as much right now.
Right.
But like, I kind of geek out about this stuff. The election part, that I pulled that for a reason, because that's my biggest key indicator of why I think it's going to go down. But also too, and that goes into human emotion for what you just said. Obviously, there is a veil of progress, right, and we've seen it historically with any presidential candidate. So, have to imagine it's likely to happen again. But the other thing too is you're going to start to see people. We did it a little bit last year. We talked about it in our meeting earlier this morning. But essentially, people start to understand that this is how it's going to be. You cannot time the market.
Yeah.
When's the best time to buy a house? It was yesterday. It's always going to be yesterday. The next best time is today. That's one of those dumb cliches that we always say, but it's true. You can't time the market. And if hell, you and I are a walking example of us not knowing.
Right.
I mean, we both had high hopes that that we thought that things were going to come down.
Right.
But we don't know. But now it's like, man, we should have bought a house 6 months ago.
Right.
And here we are waiting, and now it's even worse. So I just think when human emotions kick in, it's like, okay, it's not getting any better. I either want this or I don't.
Right.
You have to, at that point in time,
Yep.
Do that. Now that's not a prediction for rates. That's not really my wheelhouse. My prediction is more for when we talk about this inventory. There's nothing that I can even look to point to unless something drastic happens, kind of like the rentals when he talks about that episode.
Right.
Listen to that episode if you haven't already. It's pretty interesting. That's kind of the biggest factor for me, because you do have now everybody is renting their house out. And yes, we always talk about it. Oh my God, everybody has these low interest rates. They don't want to sell. They don't want to move. Well, if they are moving, they don't want to sell.
That's the thing.
Because they can make some money there. So that inventory is not going to go up, in my opinion, unless something happens with the rental market. That is our biggest thing. Now, there are stats out there that say that if every vacant home went on the market, this whole crisis would be over, because there's so many vacant homes. I've seen other stats that talk about now compared to 1940s. I think there was like 7% of people lived alone, like you had common households, right? And now in 2023, that number is like 40% of people are now living alone or willing to live alone. So when you think about that, when it comes to the supply, right? Obviously, 1940 was a long time ago; things were different, but that's a big
Huge
deal.
difference.
So now people are more willing to live alone, and that's great. That's fine. But that also has a factor of our inventory and our supply. So I don't see it getting better. But yeah, I just don't. I couldn't tell you anything about rates. I don't know. I'm just looking again at history.
Exactly. As far as rates go, and but the thing is that we can promise is if rates do drop to 5%, let's say, a lot of people will be willing to sell houses between 3 and 5 because they can stomach going from 3% to 5%, because even almost 6% in my opinion, because that sounds more normal in people's minds, and that mindset that you just talked about. Oh, 5%, that's normal. 7%, whoa. Right? But if 7% becomes a new normal, which we don't know what happened, hopefully not, but if it does, then it does. And it will just take people time to adjust. Yeah. But it could happen.
So what would be your advice for somebody that wants to buy? Let's just say, okay, we're waiting. We understand. We understand that this is not feasible for everybody. It's not fair. We don't like it any more than anybody else does. I mean, it sucks. We get that. But let's just say somebody's like, they listen to this like, okay, we're coming to grips with it. We're ready. We want to buy a house next spring. What's your advice for somebody at like today, September? What do we do between now and February or March?
I would say a couple things. One, whatever you're doing, will save money. Save a lot of money. Put all of your money, open a high yield savings account, because one good thing about interest rates rising is high yield savings account. You're getting about 4.5% to 5% interest on your money that's just sitting there, just a savings account, safest investment you can make. So save money, put in a high yield savings account, be ready to put that down payment, or say anything we make in interest, we're going to put towards buying down our interest rates if rates don't drop. So number one, save money, put in a high yield savings account. Number 2, have a conversation with the lender, even if you know you're not buying for 6 months, 6 to 9 months. And this is not a plea for lenders. This is simply, you need to know what your financial status is and what it really looks like when you're purchasing a home, so you're not scaring yourself when the time comes. You need to know that, hey, you could probably qualify just based on what you told me up to $450,000, but to be in your budget, you will probably want to be around a $300,000 house. That way you're not psyching yourself out and getting your hopes up, and then for the next 6 months of things popping on Zillow for $450,000, when your monthly payment of $2,200 is a $300,000 home. And so I would say, number 1, save money. Number 2 is talk to a lender to get that budget started now, and it's an easy 5-10 minute conversation. You don't need to apply, you don't need to do all that. You just need to talk with someone that knows what actual monthly payments are, so then in your mind you know what your monthly payment's going to be. Because if you have any inkling of wanting to buy a house, you're scrolling Zillow. You're going to, or you're going to be on MLS with Jared. You're going to, just because you like looking at that stuff, right? But if you're completely outpricing what your actual budget is for the next 6 months, you're going to be very disappointed coming to the market. So I would say, number 1, save money. Number 2, meet with the lender to get that budget started. And then number 3, just talk with a real estate agent to let them know what your timeline is and your time frame, because we know that if you want to look next spring, you'll want to start dripping on houses January, so you can get just the feel for things and see what it actually is like. That way all your eggs are ready to go. You're not putting the cart before the horse, and you're just ready to roll, so when the timing does come, you can put your best foot forward. So that's my advice. What about you?
Well, I want to touch on one thing. I think we need to rename the podcast to Dripping for Houses, because that was a nice little
Drip.
I like that, whatever you want to call it, little phrase you just said.
The drip with Jared and Tanner.
Yeah, the housing drip.
Drippy.
All right, we'll work on that. Well, I do want to go back. I have a few thoughts, but I want to clarify something you said. Why do you think people should save money?
Yeah.
Specifically, I mean, obviously we know save money, whatever.
Right. Why? Because cash is always king. We don't know what will happen with interest rates, right? The only thing you can control is what the money is that you're spending right now. If you're budgeting, let's say your rent right now is $1,800, but you're used to saving an extra $500, so your payment's now $2,300 essentially. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You're already used to spending that much monthly. $500 is just going to savings now compared to the $1,800 going towards rent. And so you're already budgeting in your mind what you're going to spend, but then also in this market, we don't know what's going to happen. If you didn't have cash in the past when there was a seller's market, then you weren't going to have a chance, right? So I'm saying I want you to be able to control your controllables, and the one thing you can control is where your money's going and how it's acting for you. And so if you can control something, control it in the right way, and then be ready that if you need to buy down your interest rate, if you need to compete showing that you have cash on hand, or if you need to put down more to make your payment where you want it to be, you can control that if you're acting and being progressive in it now, compared to if you wait and say, hey, I have enough for 3 or 5% down, all of a sudden it's a seller's market again and you can't get a house. So I'm just saying, be proactive about it, especially if you can budget. Like I said, yes, your payment may jump if you're going to buy a bigger house, but if you're already proactively budgeting for that and acting like you're spending $2,300 a month instead of $1,800 and putting $500 into a savings, there's going to be zero difference in your lifestyle when you do make that jump. So
yeah, I think that's good advice. That's going to be my number one advice too, or my, you know, if people are looking at the next year, and I do have people that have told me like, hey,
I've had plenty.
We're kind of tapped out here. We want to wait. I do not blame anybody for waiting. You have to put yourself in a position to compete next year,
right? Because
I do truly believe that it's going to be crazy where we're having to waive appraisals again, and the more money that you can save. So let's just say that we get into that market again where it's crazy. You can expect potentially 5 to 10% of your purchase price to have that amount be waived for an appraisal on an offer.
Right.
Meaning that you are going to bring that much that much more in cash in addition to your down payment in order to compete on a home.
Right.
And that's what we've seen for several years.
Right.
We are not currently there.
Exactly.
Which is, again, opportunity.
Yep.
Now, if we get back to that, people need to save as much money as possible so they can compete.
Yep.
Because if our predictions are correct, we'll get back to that.
Right.
And then on top of that, let's say you can't do that, you can't save that amount of money, because I know that's a lot, it's hard. Right. Then save some money because you might not be able to do inspections on a house. And if that's the case, have some money so that way if you do run into a situation, you're not in trouble.
Yep.
I hope that doesn't happen. I really don't. I hate that market as much as everybody else does,
Right.
and I think it sucks for buyers. I personally bought homes in that market too.
It does suck.
I did it. I waived inspections. I waived appraisals. It was the worst 2 months of my life. I mean, it was legitimately chaos in my mind and in my heart. And that's what everybody says to me all the time. They're like, man, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, it's easier when it's not my money.
Right.
Because I don't have to worry about it, but I did.
Right.
So I understand what you're going through. Because when it was
your money,
my money, like, not to say that we're loose with your money. We don't gamble with our clients' money.
right.
My point being is that we give you every opportunity to buy the house. And sometimes that means twisting your arm to do some uncomfortable things.
Right.
Now, that's going to be a good segue into my next thing that I want to talk about, which is a lot of these stats and a lot of what we're seeing right now is, as you guys know, I love to call out realtors and show people and try to prove that not everybody's built the same. And we had this conversation again this morning in our meeting, but we are seeing these inflated prices because of bad realtors making offers.
Yes.
And
talked about this.
Jordan Eckley and Kyle Blake and some of the other people in our community that have talked about this said what I was going to say too, because this is what we've seen in our past few listings. 2 offers on a house, one for asking price, one $25,000 over the asking price.
Yep.
Another one at asking price, only 2 offers. The next one was $10,000 over, waiving inspections. So these agents are going out there, and that's why I truly believe that's why our stats are a little bit skewed.
Yes.
If people were just making phone calls,
doing their job. But that is, if you're an agent that started in 2020 or beyond, that's all you know. And that's why it's so big. And it's not saying experience, like you have to work with an agent prior to 2020. I'm not saying that. I'm saying someone that's experienced, that has that role model or mentor, or that is trusted in this market, is so huge because of that. I lost one this weekend, same thing, 25, we were, the best offer they had, we were right at list price the entire weekend, and someone came in $25,000 over. What?
right?
What?
It's wild, and I think that's my advice too. So, save money, number 1. Be patient, number 2. I mean, I think that's
Huge.
a big deal, right? Don't feel like you have to make. And anybody that which goes into my third, don't be bullied. Don't be bullied by the market. Don't be bullied by your agent. And I'm saying again, don't be bullied by your agent. Make sure if you're not working with somebody that, I'm just gonna say it, you're not working with me.
Facts.
You're not working with Tanner. Tell your agent, like, before we make an offer, I want to know you called that agent.
Right.
And ask them, right? I want to make sure that you had that conversation so that we know. Now, sometimes, we heard a story today, sometimes buyers are like, don't care, we just want the house. We're so tired of looking, go to the moon because that's all we want to do. That happens,
Right.
and that's okay. I'm just saying, make sure your agent is doing their due diligence on your behalf.
Otherwise, you're going to spend an extra $20,000, $30,000.
Right. And now it might get to a point where they call you and they say, I just talked to them. They have 18 offers. You do have to do this.
You did your job.
You did your job. Like, at least you can make an educated decision based on that.
Amen.
When I see these happen, I'm just like, oh my God, it's great for the sellers, right? When you're on the listing side, you're like, can you believe this?
It's crazy.
But I feel bad for the buyers because I'm like, man, they didn't have to do that. But
Hey,
so that's just the thing: is be patient, save money, don't be bullied.
don't be bullied. That's huge.
Right.
Because especially in this market right now that we're in, it could be different in a year. But this market right now for the next 3 to 6 months, you have to have someone that's working on your side, because you could get, I'm not gonna say a deal, but you could get in for a price that's actually list price compared to $20,000 over, and that's just someone that knows the market, that does it every day.
And list price is subjective.
Yes.
We have that conversation a lot too. List price doesn't necessarily mean value, right? But yeah, I mean, I do think when you look at comps, like for instance, the one that I was talking about today, we are going to be $95,000 below one of the next comp in that subdivision. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, now again, it needs updated, right? We look at that kind of stuff. So that's how we kind of work backwards. Is, okay, we see this house, how nice it is for $595. How much will it cost to get our house to that level? That's really how we start to look at comps, especially when we're talking about buyers having to do updates.
Right.
You get that house for $500, $95,000 in theory goes a long way.
Yep.
Now, they're not going to spend $95,000, but that's how
So
we
you can make some equity.
that's how we look at it, right? that's an opportunity.
Amen.
And so I think that's the biggest thing. Tanner and I are not here to tell you to do something for our benefit.
Right.
This is how we truly feel. And I personally, I just had this conversation yesterday. I'm interested in buying another house.
Me too.
Like I'm interested in buying my next home.
Me too. I think it's a perfect time.
Yeah.
I'm looking to do investments and flips and personal items as homes as well. Like
Right.
it just makes sense at the right time because we understand what the cash flow is and what the opportunity is at hand right now compared to what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's just education.
Yeah. And I mean, in my personal situation, again, this is all about transparency, but this is the opportunity for a HELOC, right? I did a lot of updates on the house.
Yep.
I've got some equity in it. Take that money, go to the next one.
Yep.
Keep that one as a rental and use that as some more income. I mean, that's my goal. I'd love to do that. Now, I don't know if the inventory is going to allow for that in the area that I want to be in, but I'm saying I'm not just saying this.
There is one.
Right. I'm not just saying this to blow smoke.
Right.
These are honest opinions. We look at the stats. We're looking at what things are doing and how they're moving. I'm still willing to buy a house. I'm willing to coach other people on what that looks like if it's the right time for them.
Right.
And I think that's the key message that I personally want to say today. Is like, if you want to buy a house, we will find a way to make it happen, and within your comfort zone.
Right.
And I call agents and I ask.
And make sure you have someone on your side that goes over your budgets, goes over what you need, and you're good.
Yeah, and on both sides. I mean, I think we always talk about that too. Is we always kind of pat each other on the back when we do these. But it is true. I mean, I think
it is true.
Yeah, when you've got a good team with you, it's
ways.
hard to make an error. So.
Yep. Well, awesome. Well, anything else? Any updates or stats that we missed? If you guys think of anything you want to hear, call us. We'll look at anything. Kimmy, anything you got to add?
No.
Anything?
This was good.
Okay, Kimmy.
This was all over my head, so I'm just sitting back watching.
Yeah, that's my question. Kimmy has not done this process before. Is there anything that you would like clarification on?
No, this was very informative. As someone who is still renting, looking to buy a house next year, this is very informative.
There you go.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to budget. I'm not going to be bullied.
There you go.
Boom.
So we did our job.
Good job.
For at least for one of our listeners.
Yep. You always got me.
But no, I think like I'm glad that you talked about the election stuff because that was on my list to talk about today too. But
awesome.
And we have this information available. If somebody wants to check us on it, if somebody wants to see what we have, I mean, literally, I've got
printouts everywhere.
We've got it all ready to rock and roll. So if anybody is like, oh, that makes sense,
give us a call.
I don't know why people sound like that, but
everyone enjoy the fall weather. Enjoy
Yes.
football season. We finally made it.
Yes,
I'm
we
pumped
did.
up. Shout out football. Shout out fall. I'm so happy.
Our fantasy team beat Kimmy's this week too.
Oh!
Whatever.
So
I wasn't gonna say it, but now it's on air, so I have to document.
Well, I didn't draft, so shout out to my husband who did a terrible time.
Todd.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.